I slid my 2009 Ford Fusion into a space between a black Jaguar F-Pace and a pearl white Polestar 2. Their doors shut with a kind of well-practiced swagger. My own car door closed quietly and unnoticed, which suited me perfectly. 502 Bad Gateway. Unable to reach the origin service. The service may be down, or it may not be responding to traffic from cloud flared. This evening, I was 34. I wore a navy blue dress I'd taken from the back of my Portland closet. No brand names, no famous label, just understated style and simple pride. I arrived alone. No romantic partner, no group of friends, just myself. The main entrance was already ajar. From the marble foyer, I caught the sound of laughter, crisp, cultivated, and costly. I walked in. The chandelier hanging above the dining area still bathed everything in that same warm golden light, spilling over the expanse of the oak dining table. 16 chairs were arranged, surrounded by polished crystal, shining silverware, and the unmistakable aroma of wine and roasted veal. The only thing that seemed different now was me. My mother sat regally at the head of the table, exactly as she always had. She was poised, immaculate, and as distant as ever. When she noticed me, she turned her head with deliberate slowness. A smile appeared on her lips, but any sense of affection was absent. It signaled only caution. "Well," she called out, her tone just loud enough for the staff to overhear. The letdown returns to the nest at last. 502 Bad Gateway. Unable to reach the origin service. The service may be down, or it may not be responding to traffic from cloud-flared Derek Vaughan, my cousin known for being the boisterous favorite of Wall Street, joined in. Then came one from Charlotte Vaughan, Preston's wife, who had once claimed to me that achieving success was as simple as marrying the right person. I stood there, my hands awkwardly at my sides, before it finally happened. "You have always been a disgrace to this family," my mother, Vivian Vaughan, pronounced, her voice sharp as ice and boisterous. Nobody gasped in response. They simply nodded in silence or averted their eyes. I said nothing. I remained unfazed and simply moved forward, taking the last vacant seat wedged between an uncomfortable chair and an untouched silver platter. On the other side of the table, Preston lifted his glass and made a toast. "To high standards," he declared with a mischievous grin. I kept my glass on the table, and that went unnoticed, or perhaps that was entirely intentional. My eyes fell to my wristwatch, which was still ticking, a possession still under my control. For the first time in ages, I found myself curious. Somewhere inside this house, there is a photograph. 502 Bad Gateway. Unable to reach the origin service. The service may be down, or it may not be responding to traffic from cloud-flared 502 Bad Gateway. Unable to reach the origin service. The service may be down, or it may not be responding to traffic from cloud-flared 502 Bad Gateway. Unable to reach the origin service. The service may be down, or it may not be responding to traffic from cloud-flared. My mother blinked once and remarked, "That's pretty specialized." My father didn't bother to glance up from his phone. He said, "There are still options. We could make some calls, and Northwestern Law's summer intake is still open." I simply nodded, folded my napkin patiently, and kept quiet. The next morning I walked out. There were no arguments, no crying, just my silent disappearance. I avoided slamming any doors. I didn't offer any farewells. I filled 2 suitcases, grabbed a one-way bus ticket from Lake Forest Station, and headed for Tacoma, determined to pursue a dream no one in my family supported. That was when Solivane truly began for me. My first days were spent in a poorly maintained sublet, where the coffee was better than the plumbing. I worked late into the night, programming on a refurbished MacBook. I made my pitches to blank Zoom windows. I heard no 57 times until a former DISA analyst, now an angel investor, finally recognized something in me that even my own relatives had missed. She invested $200,000 in me and handed me a simple analog wristwatch with a leather strap. She told me, "You'll need a way to track your time, not just hours but milestones," and I haven't taken it off since. After landing our first Department of Energy contract, I wrote a letter to my parents, not for validation, just to share the news. 502 Bad Gateway. Unable to reach the origin service. The service may be down, or it may not be responding to traffic from Cloudflared. I even put it in a frame. Whenever a deal unraveled, I would take a look at it. Whenever another opportunity closed, I would read it once more. And with every new milestone, when Solivane reached 10 millions, then 100 millions, then finally $2 billion, I pored over that letter as if it were my compass. It wasn't there to lead me back to them, but to show me the distance I'd already put between us. I stayed away from Oregon. I didn't go back for birthdays. I skipped funerals, wasn't there when Charlotte gave birth to twins, and didn't return even when my father, Leonard Vaughn, suffered a minor stroke and Preston gave his speech on family unity. No invitations ever came my way, and I never reached out until now. Now, seated at their table surrounded by smug smiles and gleaming silverware, I stared at the same faces that once promised me I'd never make it. And I reminded myself that my reason for being here wasn't about them. I was here in search of something else. Something softer, yet carrying more weight. Something resembling closure. Dinner was veal. As always, it had to be veal, alongside wild mushroom risotto, served on bone-white china, bordered in gold. This was the very set my mother, Vivian Vaughn, had shipped in from Milan the year I turned 17. I recall that vividly because it was also the year she didn't remember my birthday. I hadn't had cake for several years. I nudged it around my plate without saying a word. Preston, as always, was in the middle of a story, talking about how an arbitration almost fell apart until he came to the rescue. He gripped his fork as though it were a judge's gavel, and carried his self-importance like an honor. Charlotte, his wife, chimed in with her usual sense of timing. She reminded everyone that Preston was the youngest partner the firm had ever had. There was so much pride in her tone, it seemed to sparkle above us. Seated across from me, my cousin Derek was loudly explaining, though no one had asked, why his portfolio manager misunderstood emerging markets. He waved his wineglass through the air as if leading invisible musicians. My mother presided over the meal from the head of the table, smiling and nodding, orchestrating the conversation with practiced ease. When her attention finally landed on me, she managed a narrow smile and remarked, "You're still working in technology, aren't you, dear? Not tech, not cybersecurity, and not even your company. Just working." I nodded. I was still designing systems. Apparently that brief response piqued more curiosity. Derek leaned over the table and asked me which types I meant. Apps, websites, or the crypto things. I could have revealed that Solivane's infrastructure supported 15% of the secure cloud operations for the federal government, but I didn't mention it. 502 Bad Gateway. Unable to reach the origin service, the service may be down or it may not be responding to traffic from Cloudflared. She wanted to know if I had a team now, or if I was still managing everything by myself. Solivane boasted 300 employees along with a new office in Osaka. We were also gearing up to submit a proposal for UNICEF, but I kept my answer brief. No, I have support these days. Preston gave me a sly grin. At some point, everyone has to find an actual profession. The laughter that followed was soft and refined, clinical. Vivian Vaughn intervened, her tone carrying a note of tact. I've always chosen my own direction in life. There it was again. That label. Different. Outsider. Unusual. Not truly one of us. Preston lifted his glass, feigning warmth. Here's to the nonconformists among us. Let's hope they find their way home in time. I didn't raise my own glass. Instead, I glanced down at my wristwatch. still running, still belonged to me. Derek Vaughan, always quick to seize a moment, leaned closer once more. He mentioned that his company was seriously considering startup investments and said he'd be open to a pitch from me. "Glad to give your little venture an opportunity," he said with a sly wink. "Little venture?" I held his gaze and simply replied, "It's not small." He chuckled. "Oh, really? Then how come none of us know about it?" I let the silence build, then replied in a low voice, "Perhaps you just weren't paying attention." Conversation stopped around the table. Charlotte Vaughn responded with a quick, astonished laugh. She certainly had a way about her. Vivian Vaughn let out a laugh, extending her hand to refill someone's wineglass. "Darling, we're only joking, just having a little fun," she said. Yet for me, it was never something I found amusing. It never felt that way to me, not once. But they simply never realized it. Next up was dessert. Fig tartlets drizzled with lavender honey and accompanied by crème fraîche. I left my tartlet untouched. Preston was in the midst of telling a story about depositions down in Miami when a gentle knocking came from the hallway. Moments later, Chelsea Monroe, my assistant, entered the dining area. Chelsea rarely dressed in black unless I specifically requested it. Tonight she wore black attire. Keeping her composure, Chelsea made her way over despite the sudden looks and bent down near me. Her voice was hushed as she murmured, "I apologize for the interruption." "But the jet is prepared," she continued quietly. "The pilot is asking me for final confirmation for Osaka. They'll need to submit the flight plan within the next hour." Charlotte's fork slid from her hand and rattled as it hit her china plate, making a muted sound. I stayed perfectly still. "Thank you," I replied, picking up my napkin. "Let Captain Tanaka know we're moving forward with the plan. We'll stop in San Diego for the board's vote. 502 Bad Gateway. Unable to reach the origin service. The service may be down, or it may not be responding to traffic from cloud flared." It was utter silence, the kind that lingers like dust after something shatters. Derek blinked at a leisurely pace. Preston's jaw flexed. Vivian straightened up, as though sitting taller could keep her grounded in a reality that was quickly dissolving. "Jet," Preston finally said. I pressed the napkin to the corner of my mouth. G-Freem. That's the plane we use for meetings across continents. Solivane secured a partnership in Osaka last quarter. "Solivane?" Derek repeated. "My business," I clarified softly. Vivian's eyes narrowed. "You own a jet?" "I have a business," I amended. "The plane is just a practical tool." I tried to laugh, but it emerged as a strangled noise. "So what are you implying? That you're actually handling a genuine operation?" Reaching into my bag, I took out my phone and launched the Reuters app. "Take a look," I said, as I slid it toward them across the table. 502 Bad Gateway. Unable to reach the origin service. The service may be down, or it may not be responding to traffic from cloud flared. "That's really you," he said. I gave a simple nod, not bothering to embellish or elaborate. Vivian Vaughn, my mother, extended her hand toward the phone but hesitated before making contact. I saw a faint tremor in her fingers as she did so. "Why didn't you say something?" she asked in a voice that was barely more than a whisper. I replied, "Would it have made a difference?" The atmosphere in the room stayed frozen. Nobody reached for their pastries. Even the air felt as if it was pausing. I glanced down to check my watch, still ticking on my wrist. It was still mine. Preston was the first to break the silence, not just with words, but with a challenge. His tone carried a sharper edge, that unmistakable note I recognized from when he was on the defensive in court. He gestured rigidly toward my phone and insisted that the article might have been blown out of proportion. I met his gaze and cocked my head a bit. "You really think Reuters overstates government energy contracts?" He stayed silent, refusing to meet my eyes. Seated opposite me, Derek still had his eyes glued to the screen, his mouth moving as he absorbed every headline, as if they might be different if he kept looking. I studied how his expression changed when the numbers hit him. 502 bad gateway. Unable to reach the origin service. The service may be down, or it may not be responding to traffic from cloud flared. Actually, I corrected softly, we passed 6 billion last month. Charlotte's fingers quivered as she tried to grab her wine. She missed the rim. Vivian, too, remained silent. She sat more upright now, as though her posture could anchor her to any remaining illusion of composure. Her eyes wouldn't lift from the spot on the table in front of her where my phone had been. Then she spoke in a gentle whisper. "You built this all by yourself?" "Not by myself," I answered. "Just without any of you." Preston let out a sharp, humorless laugh. He made a comment about family, how I should have told them, that they might have helped, since we were related by blood. Yet I couldn't forget the conversation he had with my father when I was 25. That particular conversation, where he had called me a risk and suggested they leave my name out of the holiday newsletter, replayed in my mind. I kept my tone calm and simply said, "You believed I was a liability to the Vaughn brand." Then I sat in silence. Vivian eventually glanced up at me. Relatives sometimes say hurtful things they don't truly mean. I pulled a worn sheet of paper from my wallet, the folds showing it had been saved with care. I pushed it over the table toward her. Her message from 3 years earlier appeared on the screen. Typed out, her signature at the bottom, cold in tone. I remembered her words. "You told me not to attach the Vaughn name to anything that might not endure." She didn't reach for the letter. Instead, she just gazed at it. Derek leaned forward, suddenly animated. He began describing how his company was delving into tech, bringing up the idea of partnerships, networks, and funding. I waited for him to finish and replied quietly, "We're not seeking investment." Charlotte spoke up next, trying to ease the mood. She suggested that if we had known, perhaps things would have turned out differently. Maybe I would have had their backing. I met her eyes, not with anger, but with weariness. I told her they had changed, just not in the way I needed. Vivian at last extended her hand toward the letter, but paused midway, her fingers suspended. I observed her falter, not because of what I had become, but because acknowledging the letter meant admitting she had been the author. My phone vibrated in my purse. Chelsea, punctual as always. I rose, folded my napkin, and set it down beside the uneaten dessert. "I have a board vote in 6 hours. We're putting in a bid for a UNICEF contract." I started to walk away. My mother's voice lingered in the room. "Why tonight, Sabrina? Why did I bother coming at all?" I hesitated at the threshold, still facing away from them. Then I replied that I wanted to see if anything was different. I turned to look at them one final time. Nothing had changed. I walked out into the corridor. Behind me, the dining room seemed suspended in silence, as if a play had ended, but the stage remained tense, the performers still unsure how to proceed. That's when the chaos kicked off. Preston was always the first, always the fastest to adjust. "Sabrina, hang on. Perhaps we should discuss investments. If Solivane is growing, there might be an opportunity for collaboration. A strategic alliance, maybe." I pivoted partway, just enough so he could see my expression. "You mean now that you finally acknowledge I'm real?" He remained silent. Derek spoke next. "Hey, I've always had faith in you. I mean, I knew you were capable. I hadn't realized." He let his sentence drift off. He didn't realize that I had stopped seeking his approval a long time ago. I finished the thought for him. Charlotte Vaughn gave a faint smile, one that seemed rehearsed. "If you're ever bringing new people on board, I've actually been thinking about tech-related roles." I paused to study her for a moment. Back then, She would just laugh whenever I tried to describe the work I did. There was even a time she joked to a relative that my job was working with screens. "Can you actually name a single programming language?" I asked her. Her lips parted as if to speak, but then she shut them again. She averted her gaze. Finally, my mother slowly got out of her seat. Step by step, she moved toward me, more deliberate than graceful. "You're upset," she told me. "I get it, but I shouldn't let my pride keep me from taking the opportunities my family is willing to leave open." There it was again. Family. You had 9 years to invite me in, I thought. Instead, you decided to seal the door yourself. Vivian's reply grew softer, almost caring. "You're still in Vaughn. That carries significance. It is everything to you," I told her. "But it means nothing within the world I created for myself." She barely winced, but I caught it. She stretched her hand toward my arm, probably out of habit, as if to draw me closer again. I moved back. "Don't," I said. "This isn't an argument. It's a boundary." My phone vibrated again. Chelsea. Time to go. I put on my jacket. No hurry, no spectacle, just closure. Approaching the entryway, I paused a final time, my attention not on them, but on the manor itself. Its hush, its presence. You always believed I left because I couldn't measure up, I thought. But the real reason I walked away was realizing I didn't have to meet your standards. I could set my own. Then I pushed the door open. The 2009 Ford Fusion stood waiting, engine silent, its driver already standing by the side. The air outside was brisk, but for the first time in years, I barely registered it. A gust of wind caught the hem of my coat as I made my way outside. The 2009 Ford Fusion was already warmed up for my arrival. The driver gave a nod and wordlessly took my luggage. Chelsea Monroe had selected him skillfully. Efficient, unobtrusive, meticulous. I heard the soft creak of the front door behind me. It didn't latch shut. I knew they were still watching. Naturally, they always are. Families like mine are only capable of chasing after what slipped through their fingers long ago. I settled myself in the rear seat. The leather felt comfortable, hushed, recognizable. As the 2009 Ford Fusion rolled away from Vaughn Family Manor, I refused to glance back, not even once. Not toward the pillars, not toward the panes, not toward those who once judged my value by my place at the table, the gown I wore, or the vehicle I arrived in. The quiet that filled the 2009 Ford Fusion was a contrast to the hush I left behind. This quiet lacked any tension. I had earned it. I glanced at my wristwatch. The minute hand moved forward with a soft tick, a reminder that it still belonged to me. The following morning, the messages arrived. A Xing request from Charlotte Vaughn. A voicemail from Preston Vaughn. "We should reconnect. Family synergy is important." Then, an excessively long email from Derek Vaughn about collaborative innovation that nobody needed. And from my mother, Vivian Vaughn, I received a handwritten note delivered by a courier. The pressed paper carried a faint trace of guilt. "We ought to rebuild. You have made us proud." I didn't respond. Instead, I forwarded every message to Chelsea Monroe with just 2 words: block list. Later that evening, a shipment arrived at Vaughn Manor. 1 box, unmarked by any card. Inside was the letter my mother, Vivian Vaughn, had once mailed me, folded next to a photograph of their dinner table taken through the window. My chair remained unoccupied. The brief note stated simply, "I was there. You just didn't notice me." A few of us never truly received an invitation to the table, but we haven't forgotten who turned us away. There's no need for you to clarify. All I ask is that you share a single word they never mentioned to me.